With Sam. In just a minute, we'll try to explain to you how we're related. Great-grandfather?
Yeah.
Okay, we're on the same tier. That's right.
Yeah.
We're actually
Yes.
just
So we would be third cousin.
second cousin.
Yeah,
Right.
second cousin.
Yeah,
We'd
we're
be
actually second cousin, just straight across.
Because your mom would be a daughter of David S., and my dad would be a son of Eleanor S. Yeah, so they would have been siblings. So that's how
Yeah.
we're second cousins.
Well, we're in Sam's big barn, and I was making the coffee today, and so I have the coffee here, and we're just doing a French press coffee.
And I've been waiting for this coffee all morning.
All morning.
And it's
finally coming.
It's 9:38 here,
Yeah.
our time.
Well, I'm about to make it now, so you almost just hope it's a little bit good.
We got our other cousin over here. He's got his coffee already, and he's drinking it in front of us.
I know, we should have gotten it from you, sir. All right, so here's the hot water. Now you still have to wait a minute, Sam.
Okay.
You can't just have it right as soon as it's made.
I was wondering how that thing works.
It just steeps it.
What does that thing do?
This just seals it in. And don't ask me too many questions. I learned this stuff from other people. So I got this little grinder because they've had these grinders, the Turkish spice grinders, for like hundreds of years, since the 16th. Turkish. So from Turkey, and so they made one for coffee, and I don't have to have electricity to do it. So I liked it from that perspective. So I've been having this one. I think it's kind of fancy.
So you got beans in there now?
I supposedly, I think there's one or two left down there, but I was trying to grind them all out and put them in there, because when I fill this all the way up, it's just enough to do one of these.
So this plunger that goes down is filtering that kind of.
Yeah. So the French press, you really are just pouring into it, hot water into it. It steeps it, and then you.
Oh, okay. Like
you're basically just separating it out.
Okay.
And some people have methods where you have to go part way down, part way up, all that kind of stuff. We just
push it down and drink it, right?
Right. I'm just hoping all the coffee grounds stay down there on the bottom. So that's what I'm trying to accomplish. So we have, because we're here at the reunion, we have the doors open in the back. This is where everyone's going to be tomorrow. Well, they're getting here tonight, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, tonight, this afternoon. People are going to start rolling here any moment. We got people coming from Texas. We got people coming from Pennsylvania.
Some of the folks from Texas are watching right now.
Yeah, people from Texas coming. And the people that come from Texas, they should be away probably, I'm going to guess, they're probably about an hour or so away, if that. And then we got people coming in from Pennsylvania. They'll be here in about 11 o'clock. They texted me this morning. We got people coming from Michigan, Kentucky. Where all did I know that they're coming from?
All right. I'm turning up the volume for us here. So,
is it loud?
Well,
Dorcas, audio was a little low.
Dorcas said it was a little low, so we're trying to up it a bit. I think we can go even higher than that. All right. Is that better? I think it's a little bit better now. So yeah, so we got people coming from all over the place, but it's my great-grandfather, well, it's our great-grandfather, Sam R., and Lizzie.
So what's so neat about this is me and Irma Mast, Willard Irma Mast. Irma is also, she's married to my dad's first cousin, which would be his mom's first cousin too. Probably about 3 years ago or so, we were over there visiting them in Missouri, and we had talked about having a Born Trigger reunion. And so we had talked about having it at her place because she's in Missouri. They are in Missouri, and so Texas people could come up there and we could go out to Missouri.
Yeah, I remember when we talked about that.
But it just seemed like nobody ever wanted to host it. And so finally last year, me and Polly just said, "You want to just host?" I said, "Yeah." And I said, if anybody, if everybody has a problem with having it all the way out in Indiana, then so be it. We're having it. Either come or don't come.
So here we are, and I was here first. I just want to say, except for the locals, there's people who live around here that are also related to us, and they beat me, but I was here first.
Yeah, you were from Colorado too.
Yeah. All right. So Dorcas says that it's called a press because you're pressing the grounds down, just like you would press your tea bag against the side of your cup. Like when you finish it with a tea bag, you go squeeze and you pull it out or something.
Okay.
But someone told me not to ever squeeze the tea bag because it brings the bitterness out into my tea. So what are you going to do with that? Did I get the bitterness into my coffee? You want your coffee now, though, don't you, Sam?
That'd be nice.
All right, let's.
Craving it all morning.
Here we go. Hopefully be worth something afterward. So his cup says best dad of the year or dad of the year. How much do you want?
That's good.
I guess I need a little for myself.
So my wife and my children, they got me this cup for Father's Day this year. So I
Yeah.
guess I'm the dad of the year this year.
Well, so my cup is just a travel mug, and the way I got my travel mug is that when I was down at Stacy's family last week, they were trying to figure out whose travel mug this was, and nobody claimed it. So I just said, if no one claims it, I'll take it. I have it now. So whoever's out there, it says, God is my refuge and strength. Right there on the side, on the front, it has a little verse from the Bible. So if it's your cup, it went to Indiana, and I'm calling it my cup right now, but if you can claim it and prove it that it's yours, picture evidence, you can have it back.
Picture evidence with picture ID.
Yeah,
With
well,
picture
you have
ID.
to show me that you were in the picture with the mug and so on and so on and so forth. But you'll have to pay postage. So.
No. Whoever that is, right?
Whoever that is, whose mug I have.
But you think it comes from Texas? Is that where it's at?
Well, it was in Texas. It was left at my father-in-law's house, and he was trying to find the owner. And I finally said, if no one wants it, I'll take it. And so I have it here.
That's just good. That sure hits the spot.
Yeah, it's warm too. That's nice. It was actually, I got out this morning, and your children were outside, and they said they were cold and shivery, and their dad didn't let them wear coats because he said you can play without them. And so they were playing without them. So, dad of the year.
Malachi was out with coats and had gloves on.
It was 75 degrees.
I'm like, why are you wearing coats?
Well, maybe not quite 75, but it was close.
Why are you wearing coats? I said, it's warm enough out here. Just take your coat inside and your gloves off. And Jethro had his thick winter coat on with his hoodie on. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. It's not that cold.
Man. Yeah. So I was this morning briefly I've been using my phone a lot for devotions because I can read it in the dark, right? And so the scripture that I read that I started thinking about was when Paul was writing to Timothy, and he says, the things you have heard from me among many witnesses, commit these to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. And so I was thinking about you and myself and just how in my life there's been different people who have passed things on to me that have been super helpful. And it's interesting what those kind of things are, because sometimes, when I read that, I think, okay, so we got to get our whole doctrinal statement in place, make sure we know what we believe about everything. But the things I've actually learned from men have often been a lot less intense than...
That was my wife, by the way.
She just took your
My
thing.
Ranger.
Your Ranger, okay. So, anyway, a lot of the things we learn, like I remember trying to learn how to solder plumbing. If you've ever not soldered plumbing and then you try to solder plumbing, copper pipes, and you have the little bit of solder and you have the little torch, and you put the fittings together and you're trying to make it go all the way around.
Yeah, I've never done that. I'm always afraid to do that.
Well, the very first time I did it, I was like going around and around and around and around and like heating it up.
But you don't need to.
No, what you do, this is what I learned from some man taught me this. It was Pastor Philip, I think, down in Texas. But you just hold the heat on one side.
Yeah.
You stick the solder on the other side. When it's hot enough to melt the solder over here, it'll go everywhere. And when I did that, it was so awesome.
Yeah.
Like, that's the hot Texas attic discovery type thing. You're like, wow, that works. So that's the kind of thing that now I'm like, if I see someone with copper tubing and going to do, I'm like, do you know how to do the soldering thing?
Yeah.
Because I've learned it and now I want to tell someone else. And so some of the things we learn are like deep spiritual, right? And others are just when you learn how to do something.
Well, there's a couple things that come to my mind from what I learned from men. First one is like from my dad. One thing from my dad is that I was doing construction with my dad, and I was the oldest, and I could say I was probably stubborn and, you know, for lack of better terms, bullheaded. I don't know. But when Dad
He had strength of character. Yeah.
Anyways, when Dad asked me to do something in the job, you know, in the workplace, and it wasn't right, and we had to tear it down and redo it, and it was things that you never would see. You would never see it.
Okay, it'd be behind.
Yeah,
it's
behind
going to
you.
end up behind the sheetrock
Yeah,
or something.
But that wasn't good enough. It had to be done right. If it ain't done right, it had to be done right. And he'd make me tear it out, and I used to get so frustrated with that. I used to get so frustrated, and I would tell him, "Why? You can't see it." He said, "Look, you're getting paid to do it whether you're doing it or not, tearing it out. So just tear it out. Do as I tell you because I want it done right. So when the homeowner comes out and sees it, they can see that's done right." And I took that to heart so much to this day, and that's the way I am today. This day in my business that I do. I told my guys to tear it out. You're getting paid anyways to do it. Do it.
When if you think about it, what he said about the homeowner, so the homeowner's paying you to build the whole house,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
And so if he comes out in the process and he sees something, it's like, that looks a little wonky, it causes him to have less faith in you and
That's
your
right.
work. And so it's about the process too. That's what I often forget about life. I'm like, I want to get to the end result. I'm like, well, the end result looks right. We're good, right? But sometimes the process is important.
Yeah,
and
it is. It is important. And then, just for example, and the reason I am like that, I thank God so many times already just because of what Dad has taught me
Yeah.
in this trade. And honesty is one thing that he's taught me, you know, and integrity and all that. But one thing also that I've learned from men, that I know I know an older gentleman. It's a good friend of mine. He was a friend of mine when I was Amish, and I remember when I had a conversation with him one time, and he said, "I'm going to tell you something about my personal finance things, but I don't want you to tell anybody about it."
okay.
And so I said, "Okay, yeah, whatever." But me and being in the Amish culture, we felt like that we could say everything to the Amish, you know,
Because that, you weren't telling anybody.
we weren't
'cause
telling anybody.
you're
We were
just-
telling within the church because they would because we're brought up like if you keep anything outside the community, then God knows that too, and that's
Right.
bad. So you got to keep it within the community, even though that's not what they teach and say, but that's the mindset that we have.
yeah, what you learn.
And that's what we learned. And so I went and I shared with my dad what this gentleman told me. And I even told this gentleman a secret that I was not really supposed to say out of the community. I told him something about something that was going on. And it wasn't I don't know, a couple weeks later or so he said, "Did you talk to your dad about what I told you about?" I said, "Well, no. Did you talk to your dad about what I told you?" I said, "Well, that's not what I'm asking you. Did you or did you not talk to your dad about what I told you?" I said, "Yes, I did." "Why?" "You told me you wouldn't tell anybody."
Wow.
I'm like, "Well," I said, "No, you told me you wouldn't tell anybody." I said, "Well, I just," he said, "You told me something about so-and-so, and did I tell anything to them?" "No." He said, "Because I told you I wouldn't. I held my word."
Wow.
And to this day, I value that so
Wait.
much.
That's awesome.
I value that so much, and that's what and when I tell someone something, to this day, and I tell them not to say anything, or if they tell me not to say anything, I will not say it.
Right.
Because they asked me to, and I committed to
Yeah.
it, and now I won't say it.
Yeah, that's so it's those kind of things. You learn something like that, and then you the next person. Yeah, there was something recently that have been trying my whole life to do, and I wish I could remember what it was, because someone showed me the quick way of doing it, and now I shouldn't have brought it up because I can't remember it. But
And then there's also, and you might know who said this, there's a famous speaker of some sort or another that said something in these lines, said, if you always say the truth, you never have to remember what you said.
that's right.
And someone showed me that, or some guy, or then I read it. It wasn't really from influence from someone, but I read that. But I took that as my, what words would I use? But I use
Like
that.
your motto.
Yeah, like my motto. Like anywhere I go, wherever I go, I always say the truth, no matter
Right.
what. As long as I know what the truth is, I say it. If I don't know
Right.
it, I say I don't know.
Well, and one time I was asked to do I was a witness to an accident, And so they called me a couple weeks later to get my side of the story. And so I told them my side of the story, the way I had seen it. And what had happened was we were driving along, and there were 3 little boys wanting to cross the street. And right as we passed, 2 of them ran across the street. One of them waited, and then there was another truck coming. And so the one that waited, he was not sure he could make it, and he finally just decided to go anyway. Well, he didn't make it across. The truck hit him, and he lost a leg because of it. He lived, he lost a leg because of it. And when they were asking me for my witness, this ties into your story, I was telling them what I saw as if I had seen it from the front of the truck. Now, we were down the road. When the truck went past us, I looked behind me, and the guy I was working with was like, did he make it? And I was like, I don't think so. And we stopped and went back. And I saw the boy pinned underneath the wheel of the truck. And I had seen him start running, and I saw the truck go out like this. But I didn't see the moment of impact. Well, in my witness, when I was telling them about it, I told the story as if I had seen it from here and what he had seen. Hey, Peter, how's it going out there?
Good.
You having fun in the bouncy house?
The bouncy house is
Anybody
here.
crying yet?
Malachi's been hurt a few times on the slide.
Well, he's got to
That's where
toughen
there's
up.
the most collisions.
But you're having fun in general? Yeah, awesome. Thanks for checking in. So, but in my account, after I had done the whole witness thing, and I was sitting there thinking about it later, there was no way I could have seen it from that angle. So I was telling it as if I'd seen it from sitting in front of the truck. We were already, 100 yards or more down the road. I was looking out the back of the truck window. The big truck that hit the boy blocked my view. And so I thought about that sometimes. We tell stories, because now that I'm married, like, there are some stories I'll tell, and Stacy's like, I don't think it quite happened the way you remember it. But emotionally, that's what I felt. And so, like, with the little boy, emotionally, I felt as if I had seen that. And so when you say, well, the whole tell the truth till you always tell the same story, I'm like, yes, I agree with that, and I try, but I find my own imagination sometimes changes the story.
It's so true.
Just because of what I feel about it.
And I think we all struggle with that.
And it's not that I'm trying, or like I'm not even trying to embellish it. It's just the way I remember it can be.
Because it did happen like that.
Right. That's why I need photographic evidence that this mug is yours, because you might just remember something that's not actually true.
It's funny.
So we have the idea of faithful men, like, when you commit something to someone else, like when you're working with a team, with a crew, like your dad teaches you things, you learn stuff, then you're expecting people that work for you to learn the same thing. And I learned this quickly when I was working construction, was whoever was either the contractor we were working for or the supervisor that was there would determine what kind of corners we used. Did we use the California corner? Did we use the Texas corner? Those kind of things for framing, we would always have to ask the guy that we were working with, because they would have their own style, and their reputation was on the line. Right. And so even though I knew how to frame something up, I had to frame it up the way they wanted it, not the way I wanted it. And that took me a little while to learn, to not always be like, well, but that was on a different job. This is my job, so this is how we're doing it.
So
yes, sir.
Something comes to my mind too, as you were talking there, is like, what do we learn from faithful men that we can take and to carry on? Yeah. But can we also say that, what do we learn from people that we see that we don't want to be like?
Well, and they call that learning by antithesis. Like,
is that what they call that?
It's the opposite. You're like, no, don't want to do that.
Because I'm in the business world, and doing in the business world, and in the ministry, being in the ministry. I deal with customers on a daily basis, and do you know how many times I come up to the customer and say, well, we called this contractor and that contractor, and they never called back. Yeah. Or they never showed up when they would, or whatever, because they're so busy. And the same way with pastors. I mean, I hate to say this, but some of the people that I deal with that are hard to deal with sometimes because of being so busy, when I go to look for churches for support, I talk to pastors, and they don't respond back. They don't respond. They don't email back. They don't respond back. Well, that's something I don't want to be. So
Right.
when I get email from pastors, I respond back right away. So I learned from that aspect too, from that way
Yeah.
as well. And so that's where I try to, like, I can't sit here and say, well, I learned this from Faithful Men so much, but I could say more on this side
Yeah.
of what people didn't do that I learned from.
You learn things
If
that
that
way
makes
too.
sense.
Yeah, and then there's, like, I am sure that I've learned a lot because I've sat with men
Me
and
too,
we
yeah.
were reading through passages and they were talking, and it wasn't always that light bulb moment of, aha, that's how it goes. It was more of a, I just learned, because now I discover that, like, with my sons and with other people, I'm always trying to, like, tell them something. Did William get his ride yet? He cried yesterday so much when we left because
Oh, we need to
he
give him a
wanted to be
ride.
on the ride.
Well, we can
Stacy
give him a
told me. So he'll have to get a ride later.
Oh, yeah, we'll give him a ride.
He saw it now, but he's running to the bounce house. So I feel like a lot of the things we learn, we don't even realize we're learning them. And but where we notice it, like I was recently, there have been more young men in my life, and I've noticed that some of the young men, like you and I, the amount of work we do with our hands, that we can do with our hands, what we're willing to tackle, is huge because of where we come from. Where we expect that we can take on just about any project and we can do something with it. And sometimes, like you were saying yesterday, sometimes we get a little too excited and we break things in our strength of just like I wanted, you know.
Because, yeah, exactly.
And so-
I'm not going to go any further, but yeah.
And so with that idea, I've met some young men who grew up in a house where their dad never fixed anything, never did anything, you know, still had a job, still provided for his family, was, you know, not a bad man, but didn't do the whole hands-on thing that you and I just picked up from our culture. And the amount of things those young men don't know.
Right.
Like, you know, for them, they learn what a Phillips screwdriver is late in life. Like, you know, I was 4 or 5 out in the shop with Dad, and I wanted to help him, and that's a lot of work having a kid help you, right?
Yes.
It's, you know, I know.
do. I do, because my boys beg to go to work with me every day.
Yeah, and
And they got to drag I bought toolboxes with tools in. They got to drag it along, you know, because it's got to be so important. So you got to let them bring it along, you know, and take it to the job.
They might need it.
And as soon as you get to the job, Malachi pulls his new apron out, puts all his tools in there, and he never uses them. But you got to let him go through that process,
Right,
because that's the way it
needs
was
to
with
have
me.
it with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
When talking about work, that's work, you know.
Right.
Got to wait on him till it gets, yeah.
And I would want to hand screwdrivers to my dad at 4 or 5, and he would ask for it, and I'd give him. He'd say, "No, the Phillips," and I'd be like, "Who?"
Yeah.
And I, you know, and Dad was working. This is what I remember from the small engine times: is he was a fast worker. He was always moving quickly, and it wasn't like he didn't have time to. Okay, now hand me the screwdriver.
That's the way it was with my
Like,
dad.
I need it now. And so I had to learn, if I wanted to help him at all, I had to be really fast. And later he would just be like, here, take this motor or whatever small engine he's working on, just tear it apart. I need it, every piece taken apart. And so it would keep me busy for hours. And I'd be like, what size it is? You know, I would want him to tell me what size the socket was or the wrench was. He's like, they're over there in that drawer, find the right one. And so I'm like, okay, so I have to figure it out myself? Yes, because basically he was saying, I need you to stay busy over there while I'm remembering it now, and I'm like, that's what I do with my boys. I try to give them jobs that they can do and learn something, but where they're not constantly asking me for every next step, but they can figure stuff out.
So one thing I remember about my dad is, like, growing up, you know, I went to work with Dad when I was a real young age because I loved doing carpentry work. I still love to do what I do today, and it's a passion of mine. And I remember going to work with Dad, and what he would do, as I got older, what he would do, he would take a 2-foot square. You know what a 2-foot
Yeah,
square is,
yeah.
right? He would take a 2-foot square, and he would cut out stairs with that, and he would cut out rafters with that. And I was bound and determined to learn how he does that.
Yeah,
I was bound and determined, but he would never sit down and show me how to do this.
okay.
And he would just rattle it off and because he said, and he would, like, in a sense, well, I can figure it in my head, but I don't know how to explain it to you, whatever.
Yeah.
But I was so determined to learn how to do rafters. And I had an old gentleman.
So he wasn't using the little speed square. He was using the
was
regular
2-foot
builder square. Yeah.
2-foot square, they call it 2-foot square, 16 inches on one side and 24 inches on
Yeah.
the other.
Yep.
And on it has the different lengths per foot on per pitch.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
It's got it on there.
right.
That's what he would use.
Yeah.
He wouldn't use a calculator. He would calculate everything just on a piece of wood.
Right.
On a piece of paper with a pen. I could see him do it all the time. Well, I loved that, and I wanted to learn how to do that. And I remember him actually showing me how he does stairs then. And one thing he always does is when you build stairs, he makes sure that the top stair is the same height as the bottom riser. So if you only got carpet on top and hardwood on the floor, it's still going to be the same height. He figures that all out.
Okay.
A lot of contractors don't.
Right.
They just have preset stairs. They stick them in there, and it might be 8 inches on top and 7 inches on the bottom.
Right.
Well, that's what I do now. I strive to do that same thing.
So the word equal
Equal.
is the same.
And then I was in charge. Dad put me in charge of building a big church house building, and I had this older gentleman that worked with us. He was a finished carpenter. I went with him to work one day and saw how he did finished carpenter. And to this day, I remember how he did it. And there's just some neat tricks that you can do to do
Yeah.
trim. I'm not a trim man.
I'm not a trim man either.
But I can do it enough now that I can make it look good, and just the tricks that he taught me.
I can't do all of the molding. Some of them I waste so much when I'm cutting. Well, I can do it, but I have to buy extra because I'm going to cut
Yeah.
the corner wrong.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. And so that's what I learned from Dad. But and so now today, and to be honest with you, I got to say something, and I'm going to say it on air here.
Yeah.
Dad called me yesterday and had a rafter question.
He asked you the question,
He asked me the question.
and you. Okay, so. So I don't know. My dad might be listening, but we had this. I was talking with my sister this past week, and we were talking about driving because my dad learned how to drive 1 year, and then the next year my sister and I learned how to drive. So we watched him learn how to drive, then we learned how to drive. So they were driving somewhere, and Ruth was driving, and Dad asked her, "How did you learn how to drive smoothly?" Or I don't remember exactly what the question was, and she's like, "Well, you taught me." and it was kind of funny because the whole idea was that he was saying, I don't drive like that, so why do you drive like that? And she's like, well, one time in your life you did drive like this. So it's funny how we teach people things and we come back around to asking them, how do you do this?
Yeah. It was a great question that Dad had, and I said, Dad, let me call you right back. I need to sit down and do a little bit figuring, but I got this calculator now, and I get this
You can go
calculator.
faster.
Yeah, I can go fast, figure it out, and he already had it most figured out in his head, but he was
Right.
just
He
confirming.
was missing one.
He was
like, is this
confirming.
right?
He was confirming it, which surprised me. I was so
Well, I'm
blessed.
just glad he was free to call you because that's an honor.
I was blessed. I was
Yeah.
very blessed and honored to have
I know with technology it happens all the time. I teach someone something and then later I'm like, can you show me what I told you? And then they tell me, I'm like, oh yeah, and because I forgot. Like I had to go watch a YouTube video or something to figure it out,
Oh,
right?
really? Yeah.
And there's just too much with like the church live stream, church audio sound, all of the stuff we're doing here, film stuff. There's just so many things that. But I would say that one of the things for me, what did I learn from men? Like from the bottom line for me is that I learned from watching my dad that if I'm a man and a man somewhere out there is doing it, then I can do it.
So one thing I learned from men too, what I wanted to say too is before I lose my train of thought is, as far as being a believer,
Yeah.
and something that I've learned so much is your speech. Watch how you speak. Watch
Yeah.
how you talk. And I had the guy that married Polly and I. His name was Glenn Yoder, and I never just talked like this. But one thing that he said that I've really learned, and I've added to that into my life, so I can carry that on to my family and to the people around me. And that is, for one example, he said, "Now, Samuel, when you marry Polly, I would hope that you would not call her old lady."
Oh, like that disrespectful, like the old man, the old lady.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I would hope that you would not call
Yep.
her, well, my old lady's gonna cook dinner tonight, and what's your old lady doing, or
Yeah.
like that. I would hope that you do that.
Yeah.
And I like was drawn back when he said that. I'm like, but that's the kind of people I was around before.
Because that's what the
That's what
people
they
you
said.
were around
And
did
so,
that
but
kind of
but I never said that. I mean, this
Yeah.
was when I first married Polly, and so I took that as very disrespectful now. And now I'll correct someone if I see someone. I'll kindly tell them.
Speak good to your wife.
Yeah, I'll kindly tell them, saying, look, I would never call my girlfriend or wife old lady.
Right.
And so, and I learned from that, and like, one thing I learned too is like, vulgar words or anything like that.
Yeah.
I don't try to speak like that around my kids because of being influenced by men like that.
Right.
And so I try to
Right.
do the same thing, not just with my kids, in the workplace
Yeah.
too. I try not to do that
Yeah.
because, so this is because of men, of faithful men that showed that to me just by their actions.
I had and I talked about it on one of my coffee talks some months ago about the time I lied about where the keys were, because we were all looking for keys, and in the end I found them in my pocket. But when I discovered they were in my pocket, I was in the men's bathroom. So when I came back out, I said, I found the keys, and everyone's like, we've been looking for 20 minutes, maybe longer. Everyone's like, where were they? And I was like, in the men's bathroom. And one of the other guys was like,
I was just in there.
I looked everywhere in there. And so anyway, in that whole story, I ended up having to, like, I couldn't apologize to the family that was working with us that whole week. It was Christmas. And so I wasn't able to tell them, because we got in the car to go home, and I was like, Stacy, I just lied. And so I felt like I had to correct it, right? And for me, the whole thing that was happening in that moment was one of my mentors, Little Bear, had told me how he struggled with lying like that, where he didn't want to appear stupid or foolish. So he would just tell a little lie to make himself look better, and then be like, why did I do that? And so he had told me how hard he worked to correct that, and how he didn't want to, and so he had told me all of that, and I was like, yeah, I was kind of thinking, well, I don't have that problem. And so in that moment when I told a little lie, because I did find the keys in the bathroom, but they were also in my pocket, so they hadn't been in the bathroom a minute before,
Right.
you know? And
Right.
so,
But it's just natural for us to do so as human beings, because we don't want to look foolish and little.
Right.
And I have to admit, I struggled with the same thing
well,
before. I
it's
struggled so much too.
with your children, you'll find out that it's the good children who lie,
That's the
because
truth.
they don't want to let you down.
That's true.
And but in that instance, I remember thinking about, well, what did Little Bear tell me? And he was like, you have to apologize it and correct it.
And move on.
Well, and he was like, even do it publicly. Just admit it, say it, because every time you have to say something in public or whatever, it'll help you remember. So
Yes,
by the
yes.
time next Sunday rolled around, I still hadn't seen the family that had been there with us closing out on Christmas Eve. And so they were all at church doing music and everything, and I didn't get a chance. I couldn't talk to all of them at once at any time until I went up to preach. So guess how I had to start my sermon? I had to say, okay, so Christmas Eve, this whole thing happened. And I just remember the look on Andrew's face when I said the keys were in my pocket, and I said I found them anyway, I apologized, and he was just like, I knew they weren't in the bathroom. But when I went through that process, I felt like I had finally learned what Little Bear was trying to tell me.
Right.
He's like, it's just not worth it.
Right.
But in order to show to yourself that it's not worth it, go ahead and make it hard on yourself.
So,
And-
in that same story, like that, and what that is, how much time do we have?
We're about out of time.
Okay.
So
So, real quick, so when a lot of young ladies and men leave the Amish, for example, I had a first cousin that just left the Amish 2 months ago.
yeah,
And she's like, yeah, when you ask something, yeah, and she doesn't understand, and I can clearly see she doesn't understand. Well, she got married to a non-Amish person, and I told him he needs to be patient with her.
right.
He needs to be very patient
Because-
because I could hear a little bit that he was a little bit frustrated with what she said. I just can't. I said, you have to be patient. And then when I talked to her, I said, always say the truth. I said, we're always.
But here's the problem in that instance. What you're explaining is when we're transitioning from one culture to the other, we don't always know what the truth is. We don't even know what we want.
That's true.
And so when someone says something, we say, yeah, okay. And then later we think about it, we're like, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. So
And-
like one thing and that's what I dealt with when I first left. When somebody was explaining to me something and they would ask, do you understand? I would say, yeah, and I would have the furthest
No
idea
idea.
what they're talking about.
And
so
you're
someone,
hoping there's no test, right?
so someone told me, and this goes with that scripture you're saying.
Yeah.
So someone told me, never be afraid to say that you don't understand.
Right. That's good.
Never be afraid to say, well, I don't understand. Can you elaborate or can you explain? And I started doing that, and let me tell you something. I have learned so much.
You learn way
more.
more that way. That's
way
true.
more. And so that's what I told my cousin. I said, never be, I carried that same thing to her.
Right.
I said, now never be afraid to say, I don't understand.
Yeah.
Never be ashamed to say that.
It's and you know this from being on a construction job. If you tell someone, I need you to go do this, this, and this, and they are like, yes, sir, and then they go over there, and then they spend the whole morning trying to figure out, they have no idea what they're doing. You come later like, well, why didn't you just ask me if you didn't know what that meant?
Right.
And because I've been in those shoes where
And I deal with that with my
Someone says-
men. I deal with that with my men sometimes.
And a couple times when this was when I was working at the auto parts stores, they would tell me something, and they would rattle off a few things, like part numbers and things, and I would be like, I don't know what they just said, but they told me to go over there and do this, and they said it with such finality, so I would say, yes, sir, and I'd go over there and be like, okay, are there clues here for what I'm supposed to be doing? And, oh, they said this, there it is, okay. And they said, and so it came, and they knew it would if I just went over there.
Gotcha.
And so there's sometimes when someone gives us those kind of instructions where like, if you'll, you know, and so, but it's so communication. I'm telling you what, Stacy and I are working on so much. I'm constantly finding communication is I think I'm communicating. I think I'm a communicator, and then I'll be talking with someone and find out that I didn't communicate. And so that's something I'm trying to learn, is how to be a clear communicator.
Yeah.
So
Very much
anyway, thanks for joining me for coffee this morning. And
Pleasure.
and what did you learn from faithful men? You can tell us in the comments what you learned from faithful men in your life, and I will see you. I'm not exactly sure when I'll see you next week probably, but I'm at a reunion, so if I happen to do this again this weekend, don't be shocked, okay? Because do you know how many people are here or going to be here that I don't even know, and I'm related to them? So that's what I'm going to be doing the next couple of days.
That's why it's called a reunion.
But
Family reunion.
But if it's a reunion, I should already have known them in the past.
That would be true.
So it's like
Well, you know of them,
I
according
know
to the
of
book,
them.
Descendant book.
That's right.
That's right.
I know there's a lot of us. There's going to be 100 plus here, and that's just the ones who've left the Amish or are willing to meet with those who have left the Amish.
That's
There's
right.
a lot more that aren't going to be here. So anyway, next time, blessings.